The mainstream media have been largely ignoring the outcome of the independent review into allegations of inappropriate use of taxpayer funds given to entities controlled by radicalised Maori activist John Tamihere. In fact, some of the leftist propaganda outlets have been openly lying and claiming that the review clears Tamihere. Their headlines imply there's nothing to see here. Oh, there's plenty to see here. Tamihere's hatred of white people is evidence enough that leaving any pathway open between a Tamihere entity and the taxpayer's purse is going to have an almost certain outcome. Pretty surely John will find a way to funnel our money into his own Maori ethno-state cause. And that's exactly what he did. So how did he do it, and what did it cost us? Well, first you have to understand that Tamihere graduated with an LLB back in the 1980s. While John is clearly unhinged, his errors of judgment reflect arrogance, or a lack of EQ rather than IQ. He's smart, but prone to overestimating his own mana. Tamihere's technical ability with the law means that any legal arrangement made with him has to be bulletproof, or more accurately, Tamihere-proof. The first mistake made on our behalf by our government was doing business at all with entities controlled by Tamihere. You would have recently heard Police Commissioner Richard Chambers describing Tom Phillips as a highly motivated individual. What this means is that an individual is so motivated by his or her cause that they've lost objectivity in their pursuit of it. And Tamihere clearly falls into the category of being a highly motivated individual. He hates white people. He heads a Maori ethno-state separatist group that wants to overthrow the representative government and annex the territory of the New Zealand Crown. So the first factor that led to our money being used to finance Tamihere's campaign for a Maori ethno-state is Tamihere himself, a combination of legal smarts, high motivation and malicious intent. The second factor is rooted in the first, and that is the failure by the government legal eagles to make the funding agreements Tamihere-proof. Penny Hanare was the minister in charge at the material time, and this cannot reflect well on his record. Whether this failure was intentional and who is responsible are not within the review's terms of reference. I have concerns and think the public servants involved need to be accountable. The public servants who are in charge of the legal drafting of the agreements between the Crown and the Tamihere entities should face scrutiny for what appears to be an obvious omission. There is no specific provision in the agreements for what happens to the interest earned on our money when it's sitting in John's bank account waiting to be spent on providing public services to Maoris. This is what the review found. The Outcomes Agreement did not deal expressly with any investment income earned on funding paid under the agreement. The panel added that no funding made available to the commissioning agency under the Outcome Agreement may be applied for any purpose that is not directly connected to the performance of the Outcome Agreement. That omission provided the opportunity for Tamihere to interpret the agreements in a manner that has resulted in the application of funds derived from taxpayer funding being diverted to the ends of John Tamihere's ethno-state cause, namely an advertising campaign of billboards and social media influencer videos featuring Te Pāti Maori tokenism. This campaign encouraged fractional descendants of treaty subjects to enrol on their ethnic electoral roll rather than the general roll. So who were the lawyers who approved the agreements? Was the Crown Law Office involved? Was the Solicitor General, Unaja Goes, overseeing these agreements? These are serious questions. The potential interest income on $100 million isn't small change. It's also foreseeable that interest would be earned on our money. You don't just park $100 million in a non-interest-bearing account. To not explicitly state in the agreement where interest is spent is not just a minor oversight, it's a $1 million botch-up. Even Team Tamihere lawyers made this point. They told the review panel if it could not invest the funds, it would have to keep them in a non-interest-bearing account, which would make no sense. The exact amount that was spent on the Te Pāti Maori aligned political campaign has not yet been disclosed. However, the review did say that the interest earned by Tamihere on our money exceeded what was spent on the campaign. The interest earned was $1,131,615.04. The government's own lawyers, whoever they were, left the door open for John, and John did what a motivated individual with his end goals would do. He clipped the ticket on our money, and he used it against us. The other justification offered by Tamihere's lawyers for spending the interest derived from our money on a political campaign was that funding a campaign that encourages Maoris to enrol to vote was within the scope of agreed funding outcomes. The review panel accepted that that was a value judgment. But the panel also raised concerns about the campaign's emphasis on encouraging enrolment on the Maori role specifically, and the Tamihere entity's links with Te Pātili Maori. The panel were less enthusiastic about the specific campaign run by Tamihere rather than the principle that generally public funding could be used for encouraging democratic participation. So what the argument here is that it's one thing to use taxpayer funds to encourage participation in democracy. So that's like the ads we see with that silly orange thing that looks like a cheap Chinese inflatable sex doll from Temu. But to promote a particular political ideology with taxpayers' funds is another thing altogether. That's not okay. Now, I'm sorry, but I had to watch this, so you have to as well. And you tell me, does this simply promote participation in democracy, or does it promote a certain ideology? Let's watch.
Kia ora. I'm here to call the roll. Rawiri Shedlock. Kia o Poi Hippie. Desmond Te Moana McLean. Edwina Taylor. If you are Māori and eligible to vote, you have a choice. General roll or Māori roll. Materua Graham. Camellia Briggs. Tēnā koe. The more people on the Māori roll, the more Māori seats in Parliament, ensuring a Māori voice in the decisions that shape Aotearoa. Will you answer the call? Pēni kai nuku. Tāmati taurere.
Considering those behind this campaign, and with Tats Tama doing the oppressed Indigenous victimhood theatrics, I think there is sufficient tokenism in the content to safely say that this campaign was promoting radical Maori ethno-state ideology. The idea of taxpayers' funds being used to fund political campaigns promoting extremist ethno-state activists is completely unacceptable. A service agreement drafted by competent counsel should have ruled out any possibility of this happening. There are a number of recommendations made by the review panel, and I believe that these inform another value judgment, and that is whether the mainstream media is being honest when it says Tamihere has been vindicated by the review findings. The panel recommended that contracts set out the terms of investment decision-making and practices. So that's a direct answer to the criticism that service agreements should explicitly state that investment earnings on public funding is public money. The panel also recommended tightening the control over certain areas, such as conflicts of interest management, management of surplus funds, administration costs, and where the lines are drawn on civic engagement funding. These are all good recommendations. What the report does not do is clear the Tamihere entities of any wrongdoing. In my view, the interest earned on public money clearly belongs to the public, and using that money to fund an election campaign that went well beyond simply encouraging people to enrol is misappropriation of our money. And the idea that that is somehow excusable and there's nothing to see here is plainly more gaslighting from the mainstream media. The report also fails to state one thing that I think is frankly obvious. The panel did not find, but should have, that the Crown has no business entering into agreements with people who want to overthrow it. Those are my views. Leave a comment and let me know yours. Thanks for watching. Give us a like, would you, and do hit subscribe to be notified of new content as it drops. See you next time.